discussing my essay, Fusion is Illusion, Abundant Energy is Not. It's an essay about two fundamental ideas. One is that we are being enslaved by the energy industrial complex, something that President Dwight Eisenhower, in his famous speech somewhere around 1950, was warning. He was warning about the military industrial complex. But we can add a couple more of these industrial complexes, such as energy, academia, public health. They're all in that same concept of, I would say, rogue bureaucrats and industry cooperating and enslaving society for their purpose, which is to optimize for wealth and status. That's what the energy industrial complex is doing, and that's what all these other complexes are doing. I'm going to focus on the energy industrial complex in this essay. So I'm saying that basically the fundamental question is, why don't we have a Moore's law in energy? Why don't we have extreme rapid progress in energy like we have in information technology? And the answer is because the energy industrial complex is hindering this process. And the solution is disruption, technologically driven disruption. And I'm talking about this in more theoretic terms, using Clayton Christensen, which is the scripture when it comes to disruption. I have a short story in there where I try to illustrate my ideas just with a short story where a couple of people, through tinkering and engineering and iteration and error correction and further iteration and solving problems, they slowly creep into something that turns out to be an incredible technology that helps fuel energy and reduces the cost of energy by many orders of magnitude, which is the analogy that Moore's law was doing in computers and the analogy that I'm trying to illustrate here in energy. So this essay is about, it's a warning, and it's a hopeful, it's an optimistic call towards laying fertile ground for entrepreneurs, risk capital, and human ingenuity to go work on this project, at the same time warning that the energy industrial complex is actually a problem here, and we have to acknowledge that. I also want to be very clear. I'm arguing in this essay about, basically saying that all the energy sources that we have today are antiquated, they're not scalable, and they're not going to help us solve the energy problems that we have for this century. Artificial intelligence, interstellar travel, and rapid population growth. Those are the three things that we want to happen. Those are the three things which will drive growth, economic growth, upward mobility, that will improve the human condition. There could be other things that I'm not thinking about. The point is that we need better energy sources to fuel that type of growth, particularly rapid population growth. And we cannot allow bureaucrats and industry insiders to coerce us into unwanted behavior just because they are somehow hindering the development of better sources of energy. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's January 1st, 2023. This is Krim Delko. It's the new year. Happy New Year. And the fund starts with a new watermark, and therefore there's no performance yet. The markets will be closed on the 2nd and then start on the 3rd with the year. So let's talk about this essay. The title, Fusion is Illusion, Abundant Energy is Not. The link is in the show notes. It's on Substack. My attempt here is to discuss the problem and then offer a solution. The problem is why don't we have Moore's law in energy? Why don't we have rapid innovation, better and better energy sources at lower and lower cost? Why is energy a constraint? I talk about energy as an absolutely important factor in the development of our human species. Nick Lane, in his fantastic book, The Vital Question, where he talks about the origins of life, goes back and decides, this is a conjecture which I think makes a lot of sense, that energy was the constraining factor for evolution. In fact, energy equals evolution. And this same concept can be applied to our modern society, of our economic development, our political societal development. It's energy which is the constraining factor. Therefore, I'm saying in this essay that energy is absolutely crucial. It's the one thing we cannot take lightly. We have other problems, and I'm mentioning the military-industrial complex that President Dwight Eisenhower was warning us about, and the misplaced power that the military-industrial complex could take. And this is a small diversion, but I think it's important. Dwight Eisenhower literally fought the war for freedom. He fought the Nazis, fascism, communism, and Japanese imperialism, which are all the same thing. They are autocratic, coercive regimes that are against freedom, defined as voluntary interaction between human beings. Dwight Eisenhower won that war, and he saw the dangers, because freedom is not something that you win a war and then you have it. Freedom is it's a very fickle, beautiful achievement by humans, but it's also in us humans to oppose it, because in the short term it can benefit people not to have a free society. In other words, dictators, rogue thugs, coercive people, rogue bureaucrats, all these types of people that come up all the time in our society as much as in any other society. It's human. And Dwight Eisenhower saw that, and he warned us, particularly the free world. And we're talking 1950s here. There was a free world, which was the United States, and everything else was not free. And then the United States went on a crusade to fight for freedom all over the world. And within that context, the military-industrial complex was built, which is a counteracting force to freedom. Now, we have other industrial complexes. We have the energy industrial complex, we have the public health industrial complex, and the academic industrial complex. Those are all the big items that have contributed to a massive, massive debt load that our country has to carry. And that's a big problem. But what I'm arguing in this essay is that the energy industrial complex is the most important one that we have to fight, because energy is crucial for development. We can't develop with a military industrial complex that is ineffective. In fact, we have an ineffective military. We haven't won wars since World War II, really, real wars. We have lost Vietnam. We are losing this eternal war in the Middle East, or at least we're not winning it. So the military industrial complex is showing, while the soldiers and the individual generals and the technologies and the weapons are all state of the art, the complex as a whole is lethargic. The same applies to the public health industrial complex, which has coerced us into terrible types of behaviors during the COVID crisis and unleashed an enormous amount of coercive, unwanted power that we're still paying the price for. The public health industrial complex in the United States alone has wasted trillions and trillions of dollars for mistakes that they made during the COVID crisis, and we're still paying that price for that. The academic industrial complex, there is an essay I published recently about academia adopts the language of cowards, where I talk about the lack of progress in science and how science is being hijacked by the academic industrial complex. Now, having said all of that, let's get back to the point here in this essay, which is the energy industrial complex. That is the collusion between bureaucrats, industry titans, and academia to safeguard the status quo. There are analysts like Doomberg is one that I follow, an inspiring group of analysts, but they are part of the energy industrial complex because they keep criticizing everything other than status quo. And by the way, the status quo itself, for example, we should fossil fuels. Well, fossil fuels are the problem. Look at Russia. We trust fossil fuels, and now we end up with higher gas bills. What kind of energy source is that? Nuclear power. Well, look at France. The one time when we need nuclear power to bridge an energy shortage, their nuclear power plants don't work. Now, my argument in this essay is even more deeper. I'm arguing that imagine a world where we had 100% nuclear power in the United States. The kinds of bureaucratic power, the kinds of coercive behavior that would be unleashed on us by the cabal of bureaucrats and industry titans within a hypothetical 100% nuclear power fueled United States, it would be terrible. It would be much worse than what happened during COVID. You know, statements like, well, we got to lock down the states because the nuclear power plant leaks, or we got to change our education because alternative sources are a threat to, alternative energy sources are a threat to national security. They could come up with anything they want, and we'd have no power to stop them because we don't know how these things work. These nukes, they're next to us, and we don't know, and we got to trust them, and whatever they say, we just can't question it because there's no iteration, there's no error correction. None of this is tolerable within the nuclear power. That's why nuclear power is a bad technology. Let's get back to the fundamental trace in the essay, which is, okay, we have the energy industrial complex, which is a problem, and that's why we don't have Moore's law in energy, and that's why we are still stuck with 19th century technology, which is fossil fuels, and the politicizing of energy, by the way, is not helping either, because on the other side, let's say on the liberal side, they want to go back to 12th century technology, you know, biomass and wind, and yes, solar is worth pursuing, but we're not there, so we just don't have the technology. That's one area where we should be looking for disruptive technologies. And the solution, I just said it, the solution to all of this is disruption, technologically driven disruption. And I'm going back to the scripture, which is Clayton Christensen, so I'm very careful here. Disruption has been misused by investors, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. There is a case to be made. Disruption is the force that changes societies to the better. Disruption, according to Clayton Christensen, is the thing that incumbents don't care about because they don't even realize that it's a threat. And by the time they care about it, it's too late. That's why disruption enables change. And by definition, if it's a commercially driven disruption, which it is by definition, then it is good for society because it offers people products and services at better value at lower prices. That's what disruption does. And the reason the incumbents don't crush it is because they don't even realize that it's a threat. Now, I might be giving an impression here that I'm contradicting myself, because you could say, well, if you're telling me that disruption is the thing that is able to sort of come up and evolve and change society while incumbents don't even realize it, then what's your problem with the energy industrial complex? Well, there is a problem with the energy industrial complex, like all these other industrial complexes. And the problem is that they divert lots of resources from society to fuel their needs. They crowd out lots of talent, and the problem is talent. Disruption starts with talent. Disruption is about people. Peter Thiel wrote this very beautifully in his book, The 0 to 1. There's other books that I think are very good if you want to understand the character that is necessary for disruption. Liftoff, the early story of SpaceX, The Soul of the Machine, which describes computer innovation, microchip innovation, 1980s book, a little older. And I believe there's other books. There's certainly, the biography of Walt Disney, the biography of Henry Ford, the biography of Thomas Edison. These are all entrepreneurs that have been able to disrupt markets and change society for the better. So the character that's necessary, it starts with talent. That's my point. And I'm making the case in this essay that we need to lay the fertile ground. The seeds will come. In other words, the people will come. Look at how many immigrants we have here in Silicon Valley from particularly Asia, but also Europe, Eastern Europe. They come here, they flock here. People want to be working on purposeful new ideas that have potential to make them a lot of money, but also change the world. People want that. We don't have to coerce them to do that. Actually, it's the exact opposite. We have to coerce them to go drill for oil in West Texas. That's not a fun job. There's nothing wrong with oil, but it's just a stagnant, old technology. And you know, as a person, as a young person, you know you're not really contributing much to the world. You're offering incrementalism. Yes, maybe you're allowing somebody to pump gas into their SUV by drilling for oil. But is that really what you want to do with your life? Don't you want to come up with a proton gradient accelerator that changes the world, that can reduce energy costs by thousands and thousands of times, that can make energy as cheap as computer storage or compute, or even more and more and more? Like, don't you want to be participating in a Moore's Law type energy world? Well, let's try. So this is a call for everybody who cares about the human condition and a better society for their kids, which in my view is the only thing we all should be caring about. We have to leave this world a better place for our kids. We have to do that individually by generating wealth so our kids have something to fall back to, but we also have to do it collectively. What's the purpose of wealth if the world is not livable? So energy is the key, and disruption is the solution to the problem that we don't have a Moore's Law in energy. Thank you.